Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In the last episode we have added in the gameplay ability system to our game. We've made it so the jump ability is fully gameplay ability system or GAS control. So if we don't grant the ability we can't jump, but as you can see I've got the ability to jump. So in this next episode, we're going to look at converting more of the game animation sample, like the GASP system, to the GAS system using our abilities, because then we can control fine detailed things like crouching, strafing, climbing, all via abilities, making tutorials really interactive or giving us more abilities such as if your arms are tied, you can't climb things. You will need the previous episode to actually install GAS to do this. If you've already got a GAS set up, you're all good. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is just actually create a quick dev map because we're going to be in here for ages. Stop. It'll take a while to buffer this entire world. If you've not seen my previous tutorial, we've set up a basic toolbar with a dev map tool creator. It's a great thing to have and it doesn't take that long to add in. So I'll just call this gasp_to_gas. There we go. Yeah, I'll keep all that as default and I'll just tap create map. So it'll go off, create us a dev map so we can get straight in. We don't have to mess around with it anymore. There we go. The other thing I'm going to come and add in is there is a block for traversal built into the GASP system. So I'm just going to drag that in just so we can actually test climbing and such. Where's the letters? There they are. And I'll probably just come to the details, to the static mesh and just scale it up. Like so, just so we've got something to climb over. So now if I play it, you'll see I can run up, I can jump and climb without a problem. That's perfect. So let's start with that then. So if I come to my CBP sandbox character, I've got this jump here. It should look roughly like what yours does. If it looks ever so slightly differently, don't worry. I recorded this video, OBS crashed, I didn't notice, I've had to reinstate everything. But the way this basically works is when you click started or when you execute started, that's just when you've pressed and let go. So as soon as the action starts, and it checks, are you basically stood in front of a wall to climb? If you are, climb it. If any of that passes so you can climb something, then it'll go to false. Otherwise, it will attempt to jump. Whereas if you're holding it for the triggered, then that's where it continuously checks if you need to grab something in midair, say. So what I mean by that is if I walk up to this wall and just press space, it will immediately climb it, look. But if I jump and let go and don't press it, you'll notice it won't climb it because the triggered's not running. So if I run up and actually press jump and then hold it, you'll see he climbed up when he arrived. So that's what the trigger is doing. So there are actually two ways we can go about moving this across. There's the easy way, which we're going to take because it matches my game really, or the game you might be creating. And then there's the longer / harder way of doing it. The easy way is we don't move any of this code to an ability. We simply tell the ability to call that. That's it. We can just do that, be nice and simple. It means all of this code is stored inside here nice and easily. We don't have to move it. The downside to that is technically whilst you're playing the game, all of the traversal code is there, you just can't run it. It'll take up, like, if anything, a couple of mega RAM. It's so tiny. But if you're possibly going to be playing huge portions of your game where you can't climb things and you want the most optimized route, a better alternative would be to actually move all of this traversal action code and all of the following code and all the variables and all the functions, everything it runs, over to an ability instead. That's going to be a lot of work. If you want to see a video on how to move all of it so it's very, very clean, as in you can't jump, you have no existence of the word jump, you add the ability, all of a sudden you've got the entire thing, let me know, we can look at doing that. But for my game, there's not going to be that many times you can't climb something. There'll be the odd mission where you're tied up, you can't climb, you've hurt your leg, you can't climb, stuff like that. Or you're carrying too much weight. So what I'm going to do instead is keep all of this code where it is, essentially, on the player, but then I'm going to create the ability to simply call it. So let's jump over to our content drawer inside our GAS abilities folder. I'm just going to duplicate the jump one and call it GA_climbing because let's face it, that's what it's doing. And I'll open it up. If you haven't got the jump one, simply right click, blueprint class and search for gameplay ability and just create a normal gameplay ability like so. On activate ability, get the actor info, break it and get the owning actor. We're going to cast it specifically to our sandbox character, like so, because that sandbox character is the main character, and that's the character I use for all of my characters in the game. So I'm okay to cast to it, it's not like it's a one-time thing. If you've got loads of different versions of it where each of them have their own GASP implementation, then potentially look at adding an interface instead so you can call that function and get the return values. That's it. Back on here, from the sandbox character, I'm going to promote it to a variable and just call it sandbox character because we're going to be using it quite a lot. And anywhere we're not branching off, drag off and call end ability, because otherwise you'll run into something called soft blocking, where your game basically takes a path and then freezes because it can't do anything else. If this ability can only be activated once, it needs to be told when to end, otherwise you're never really going to be able to run it again because it's already running. So make sure you always call end ability. That's something a lot of people mess up. After the sandbox character, we're going to check, are they currently doing the traversal action already? If you're on 5.6, I'm going to right click and convert to branch. If you're not on 5.6, just add a branch node after it. Then if they're true, already doing it, we don't need to worry about it. They're already doing it. So I'm just going to call end ability. If it's false, then it means we're free to at least attempt to do it. So I'm going to drag in our sandbox character and I'm going to do try traversal action. Because remember, if they've got this ability, it means they can do it. So we can say, hey, attempt to climb. The debug type, we're not using the debug mode, so we don't really need to worry about that, so just keep it to none. And then for the inputs, drag off the sandbox character and do get traversal inputs. And it'll be that one, get traversal check inputs. Connect that to the inputs like so. Next, you'll notice back on our character, it does the jumping after it. So it basically says on here when you try to start, check if they've actually hit anything. If they haven't hit anything, then we can jump. Otherwise, if they've hit anything, then false, don't do anything. In this case, nothing there. So on our climbing here, we'll do the same thing. We'll add an or statement here to say, check if you can actually climb anything or if you're in the middle of a montage. Add a branch to it because unfortunately we can't do that right click thing there. If it's false, then it means we've not done anything. So we'll just call end ability. If it's true, however, then we want to actually check if we can jump, which is the same thing as getting the sandbox character, get the ability system component, and then we can simply do try activate ability by class, our jump one, connect it to true, and then no matter what, we just call end at the end like so. So the benefit of doing it this way is with the gameplay ability system, you cannot activate an ability if you do not have it. So if we fail all of this and we get to here for jumping and they don't have the jump ability, it won't do anything. It will just go straight to end ability and say, hey, you're done. That's only if we have traversal and not jumping. So maybe your legs are tied. You can't jump, but you can climb things with your hands. So that will be a good example for it. But we're keeping the jump ability because it very well may be you can jump, but you can't climb yet. Maybe your hands are hurt. You can jump over logs, but that's it. So if we come back to our sandbox character, we'll delete all of this at the beginning, except that bit there. We'll keep that because we'll need that in a minute, but we'll make a copy of it. And we'll connect this to triggered and to the started. And we'll say, activate the ability climbing. And then we'll add a branch after it and connect it to the return value. Because this here, it will return true if the ability is activated. If they've not got it, it can't activate. So if it's activated true, we do nothing. If it's activated false, it means it's not ran. So we can tell it to jump instead. And that's it. It's that simple. So I'm just going to add a couple of debug keys down here so we can actually test this. So I'll do debug key 9, where I'll give the player, give ability to jump, and also do debug key 0, where I do the exact same thing, but for climbing. I am also just going to come and remove the default ability of jumping, so they can't jump or do anything. So if you imagine you're at the start of a game, you've not been told in the tutorial how to jump just yet, so you can see, I can't do anything. But then we show a pop-up on the screen and say, hey, press space to jump. And I can now jump. But you'll notice I can't climb because I don't have the ability to do so. If I get a good run up, I don't think I can... No, I can't get up. But then we speak to the magical wizard and he says, hey, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this climbing ability. And I press 0, so we've got climbing. And now we've got the ability to climb, look, just like normal. And that's pretty much it. We've successfully converted a part of the GASP system to GAS. And we can now remove those abilities if we want to, as part of gameplay or something. The cool thing about gameplay abilities is you can also mass deactivate them by blocking them. So when you come to the gameplay ability in class defaults, you have these activation blocked tags and other blocked tags you can add. Which means if, for example, in your game your character gets tied up or they're carrying something, you can just add a tag of carrying, and then in here, say the activation's blocked if this character has this tag. And you can do it on climbing, jumping, sprinting, and then your character is just blocked when they're picking something up. This is why I love the GAS system and why so many developers rely on it, because just by doing a few things, you can mass control everything really quickly and nicely. So let's go and do some more abilities for our game then. So let's do crouch while we're here, because it's very similar to the climbing one. So I'm going to come to the climbing, I'm going to duplicate it and just call it crouch, and I'll open it up. So you can see on the crouch here, it almost does the same thing. It checks if the character's falling. If they're not, then it just goes to false, so we can just end the ability at that point. If they're already crouched, it uncrouches, otherwise it crouches. So I'm just going to copy all of that, come over to the crouch. After we've cast to the sandbox character, this is just built into the character movement component. None of this is anything specific to our specific player. So I'm going to delete all that off, and instead I'm going to take the owner character and I'm going to cast it to a character. And we're doing this so we can just call the crouch function. I'll delete the variable. I'll paste this afterwards. And then for the character movement component, I'm just going to drag off the character and do get character movement component. So I'll get the character movement, then I'll connect that to the is falling class, and then connect it across to the branch. For the is crouched variable, I'm just again going to drag off the character and do get is crouched, because that's a built-in one. And you can of course make the character variable if you want to. And then it just calls crouch and uncrouch, which we also, let's just make this a variable. Character, and I'll connect it up like that, just because then I can make it look neater. Make some space, and then we can take the character here, disconnect this one, connect it to there, and then for these two abilities we can just tell it to crouch based on character, like so. And then on false we will just call end ability, because we don't want to soft lock it. On the cast failed, just in case, we will end ability. And then on these two here we will also just call end ability. And that's pretty much it. So if we come back to the sandbox character now, we can delete all of this off of here. We can drag in the ability system component and we can call try activate by class. And in here we can call crouch. We can connect it to the triggered like so. I'll wrap my comment around it. Then I'll add a debug key. So I'll do number 9. And then I'll get the ability system component and I will do give ability. And the class we want is the crouch. So if I press number 9, it's going to give the crouch ability. So see if I come in, I press C, nothing happens at all. If I press 9 and press C, we can now crouch look. And I can stand back up. There we go. We've now got the crouch ability in GASP look. It's just that simple. So I'm not going to go through every single one and showing you just replicating the same ability, because we've done it twice and they all are the similar. So the strafe again is just adding this to an ability. Aim, adding this to an ability. But this aim one here gets a bit funky because you're actively passing in a value to it. So how do we activate this ability if we're passing a value directly into it? So let's do that one then. So I'm going to come and duplicate climbing, and I'm going to call it GA aim, and I'll open it up, and we're going to delete everything after, so it's just casting to our sandbox character. So with the aim one, we're passing in the action value to it, and you can't directly pass data to a gameplay ability when you activate it without either some modification to it so you can pass to it, or the ability needs to reach out and get the data. So this is where you look at it and you break down, do we actually have to pass it into it, or can we just execute it in a different way? So we can't just let this action value set itself here and then try to activate the ability to aim after, because this input state is actually calculated on event tick. So what I mean by that is if I come in and just outright disable the update server here, where the triggered is running, and all it's doing is setting the aim, you'll notice that I'll still be able to aim. As you can see, it's still updating correctly, and that's because the tick that handles the movement, the crouching and everything is still running. This just tells it to run again, just in case there's a downtime or you've not been granted those abilities. It just says, hey, you are supposed to still aim. So this is one of the rare instances where it's actually just going to be easier to have two abilities, aim and unaim. And then all we do is check on this action value if we can or can't aim. The other option is to promote action value to a variable and say is aiming, and then handle that in the ability as well. You can go either way you want to with it. So that being said, back on our GA aim, where we've copied everything across, from the sandbox character, I'm going to get the character input state, and then I'm going to set the members in the input state, and I'm just going to tick wants to aim. And I'm going to tick this just as true, because this is the aiming ability. And after that, just to be safe, we are going to drag off and we will call update input state server. Just so if it is replicated, it will also handle it, or if there's some downtime, if you've not granted the abilities to move or anything like that. And then straight after, we will just call end ability. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate the entire aim function and call it unaim. So we're stopping aiming. And I'm just going to tick it, just like that, and compile and save. Then back on our sandbox character, I'm going to delete all of this code here, and then I'm going to paste in our try activate ability class, and I'm going to connect it to the triggered, but I'm going to drag backwards off of the class and do select on it, and plug the action value into the index. And it'll say, if it's true, what do we want to do? Well, we want to aim. If it's false, we want to unaim. Drag this down so we can actually see it and make it a bit neater. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And now we've got the ability to aim and unaim. Granted, you do need to grant both abilities to handle it, but you could have just as easily have done it inside the ability. This is just another way of doing it. So I'll come to my class defaults, I'll scroll down, and on my default abilities, I'll just add two new ones for aim and unaim. And you'll see as we go back into the game, it will all function completely normally when I click and let go. But if I come and disable those abilities, I won't be able to aim anymore. So you can see, I can no longer aim. And with this way, it's actually quite decent, because if you have the ability to pick up weapons, for example, you pick up a sword, you're probably not going to want to zoom in with a sword. You want to, see your environment. But if you pick up a pistol or a bow, then you can also grant the ability of aiming and unaiming so you can see what's going on. But I did mention there were some other ways of doing it, instead of having two abilities, which for some cases, having two abilities might be a good thing. For example, the aiming and unaiming, for example, if you have a mini game mode where you take over a ballista turret, or you are manning a mounted machine gun, you can enable aim and disable unaim, which is perfect, because then they're always locked in. However, some things like sprinting, you rarely want the character to stop sprinting. You very well may need to, this is just an example. The option for them to enable sprinting and stop sprinting is something you're not as fluid with. You don't need the specific part of it. So there is another way we can actually do the same thing. So I'm going to come and copy the aim one, and I'll call it sprint, and I'll open it up. So instead of wants to aim, I'm going to untick it and tick wants to sprint and wants to walk, and I'm going to tick sprinting. The reason we also add wants to walk is because the old one does it here. So it basically says if you are walking, but you enable sprinting, disable walking. That's all it means. And then we'll update the state server so it'll almost permanently activate the ability and then not end itself, which in theory will soft lock it, which is what we want because it will soft lock it in a sprinted state. And then we're just going to end it straight away. And you might think, well, what's the point? It's still doing the same thing. We need to uncheck the sprint somehow. And that's why we can change around how the ability is activated. Because at the moment, our ability activates it, sets itself to sprinting, and then it ends itself. But what we can say is flip around what you already have. So if you are sprinting, make yourself not sprinting when this is reactivated. And then instead of using triggered, we can use started and completed as well. So let's just crack into doing that then. So what I'm going to do is make some space past here. I'm going to add a branch to wants to sprint. If it's false, I'm going to make it do the same thing. It wants to sprint. It's not sprinting, so make them sprint, right? But if I am sprinting already, then I'm actually going to flip it over and plug it back in, just like so. and then I'll go off and do the same thing. We can just end ability there, like so. And now what we've got this time is back on our character. So instead of activating untriggered, what I'm going to do is plug the same ability in for sprinting to both started and completed, like so. And now it doesn't matter what our action value is. If we grant ourselves this ability to sprint, and we start it now, if we hold the shift key down as we're running, we'll start to sprint. If I let go, he will stop sprinting, because the ability has started itself and ended itself. But because we're telling the ability to toggle itself on and off, that's another way you can do it. This is what I really like and dislike about GASP at the same time. There is no one way to do something. If you've seen other videos on the channel, you'll know I always say it, there is no perfect solution, and there's not. We've done it in multiple different ways now. We've got an ability that just turns itself on and then ends itself. We've got an ability that turns itself on and does nothing else. An ability that then turns itself off. We've got an ability that toggles the state within itself. You can also use gameplay tags. So you apply a gameplay tag to the character. You automatically activate this ability to start running. And then it automatically deactivates itself when you remove the tag. You can go into the C++. You can start and stop the abilities directly in there. You can use the built-in GASP input handlers. So you can see we've got this input trigger here. You can bind GASP abilities directly to inputs in your game, bypassing the need to do any of this if you want to. That's another way you can do it. There are so many ways, but don't let it overwhelm you. Just do what you need to do. And if it doesn't work, you learn for the future. That's going to be the best way. So here you can see I've got two abilities for aiming and unaiming, which is going to be perfect for my game later. And I've got one ability that turns itself on and off for sprinting. Both are completely fine. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is part 2 on converting GASP to GAS. So you can control your players' moves completely modularly to suit your game. So there we go. I hope this was helpful. One of the tutorials coming up in the far future, which I'm not ready yet because I'm still learning it, is we're going to look at also making Combat Fury GAS driven as well. So we can add that into our game because that's the current combat system I'm learning. But there's plenty more stuff we could do. If you've got any suggestions, please let me know below. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.